Well, welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses, and welcome to those of you new to the channel that might have subscribed recently on YouTube or followed us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. Thank you very much for your continued support through these rather difficult times it is supporting Aberdeen, Calum.
Very difficult, very, very difficult, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better, and I don't think it's going to get any better after the international break. This is going to be a fun podcast anyway.
It is. Well, certainly fun for Colin returning after another successful stint on our preview of the game. Colin, Celtic making it 15 unbeaten against Aberdeen at Pittodrie, continuing their rather impressive record in the Northeast. Now 4 consecutive games with defeat for Aberdeen, their worst run since 2011, but a good day for Ange Postecoglou's men, Colin.
Yeah, he's finally got that monkey off his back, hasn't he? Getting the 3 points away from home. And we were talking about this, me and some of my pals were talking about this. Aberdeen played a lot better than what Hearts did and what Livingston did, and Celtic still lost to them. So the fact that they've managed to get the 3 points at one of the most difficult away grounds in Scotland is a massive tick in the box. It's funny I can say that despite the kind of stats you come away with, the fact that it's been 15 without defeat, but it is one of the most difficult grounds to go to. It's not as if we ever turn up there and we put 4, 5, 6 past you guys. It's always a very, very close game. So yesterday, as we said on the previous show, it was no surprise. We knew what was coming. It was going to be a game that was end to end. Both teams had lots of chances and it was going to be settled by the odd goal, and that's exactly what happened. As you were saying the other day, Glen, Aberdeen were going to set up to come down and attack Celtic's fullbacks, and that's what happened. I think both Ralston and Montgomery were hung out to dry in that sense, and Celtic tried to play through the middle of that Aberdeen defence where David Bates has shown once again I don't think he's up to the standard.
Yeah, we were texting after the game yesterday, Colin. Knew you would get your point in about David Bates. Calum, we've been lucky to get Colin on the show again. He's only joining us for a short stint, so we will look at the team news slightly later on in the episode today, and we'll kind of look into some of the key points in the game whilst we've got the benefit of Colin joining us. The result keeps Celtic in the top 6. Unfortunately, we're languishing 9th, 5 off the pace of Celtic, and just 5 points ahead of Dundee, who prop up the table. But Celtic had quite a fast start and seemed to cause us a lot of problems doubling up on our fullbacks, Jack McKenzie in particular. How did you think both those fullbacks did in the opening exchanges?
Immediately, yeah, you did notice that, especially Jack McKenzie was being sort of targeted. I think that I don't know. I didn't think he coped particularly well. I don't think it was helped by his lack of support from his midfield, and Austin Samuels on the left hand side as well. It was always going to happen, sort of pinpoint the young, inexperienced fullbacks and see how they deal with it, especially with Celtic's front three, very threatening, very mobile. I felt Calvin Ramsey perhaps dealt with it a little bit better on the right-hand side, obviously. A little bit controversial talking point later on. But I think that is the type of thing that we will see in these kind of games against Celtic, against Hibs, Hearts, Rangers. They will try and expose these young fullbacks, I guess, with their lack of experience, but obviously don't lack in talent, but they're there to be got at, I guess. Yeah,
kind of maybe just exposed a slight weakness, but we know it's tough to know what to expect from both of them. And it was a real kind of eye-opener. It was quite obvious what was going wrong for us in that first half, especially the first 40 minutes. I don't really feel we got a stranglehold on the game until later on in the first half, Colin. And I suppose, that's something we talked about in the preview, that our left-hand side was possibly where Celtic could get at us. And, David Turnbull and Leo Labada had the freedom of Pittodrie in that first 40 minutes.
Yeah, and you saw that's where the opening goal comes from. Is that sort of lack of experience down the left-hand side for Aberdeen. David Turnbull taking the quick throw into David Turnbull, and then the ball across for Kyogo to put it in the back of the net. And it's just things like that I think they'll help both of the fullbacks at Aberdeen to grow. They are going to have to play these games. They are going to have to come up against big opponents, and the lessons that they'll learn from that will shape the future of their career. For me, I think the most disappointing part for Aberdeen in that first half, and it wasn't until about 5 minutes to go, was the kind of disappearance of that midfield. It just didn't seem to be there. Ferguson and Brown, two of the kind of key players for Aberdeen that they need to drive themselves forward. It was as if they didn't know how to handle the Celtic midfield. Near Beaton comes back in out of the cold, someone who isn't highly rated by Celtic fans, and yet he strolled the first half. He was walking about with his slippers on because Scott Brown and Lewis Ferguson wouldn't come out to approach him. Mm-hmm. Yes, Aberdeen did try and close down the back four of Celtic, and they closed it down when they tried to play it out from the back. But once they got it out, that was it. Celtic were good to go forward from that point on. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, Ferguson gets his goal later on in the game, and I think the Aberdeen midfield grew into it only before the man who really shouldn't be named on an Aberdeen podcast comes on for Celtic later on. But that period of domination in midfield, if Aberdeen didn't snap out of that, they were going to struggle to create anything at all. Mm. With the wing backs being exposed, the midfield just being non-existent, Ramirez was a lonely figure up front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Calum, I suppose we'll come to the goal in a second, but that lonely figure in Ramirez, we say it countless times, he needs support up there, and he did cut a frustrated figure for large parts until we finally realised what other teams have found all through the season is Celtic struggle when you attack them and chuck the ball into the box. They panic. And we only started doing that after 40 minutes. It was so frustrating whenever we won the ball back. It seems to be a style of our play this season. We win the ball back, pass it back to a centre-back, pass it to the keeper, pass it wide. Mm-hmm. Just run at them. They couldn't cope with it at times, especially in that second half. Exactly,
and it is worrying that it takes 40 minutes for them to realise whether it's from the touchline or just to end themselves out on the park. It seems to be the tale of the season so far. Ramirez cutting that lonely figure, as you say, whether it's sort of like Samuels and whoever else is out wide getting in support of them, or players breaking from midfield, like we often see Ferguson attempt to do. But as I say, it took a while to get going, and Matty Longstaff as well. We'll get on to him. He seems like he runs in treacle.
He's not up to the pace of the Scottish game.
And it's a worry, you go not only for Aberdeen fans, but also you think for Newcastle fans, that the fact that he isn't coming in here and setting the league alight at all in any way, shape, or form, he just looks like a bang average sort of midfielder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, the problems were coming down that left for Aberdeen, and we didn't heed the warning when David Turnbull swung in a great ball for Near Beaton, who, Colin says came in from the cold, and maybe that is a reason why he heads past the post. The Celtic fans that were in attendance at Pittodrie thinking that had hit the back of the net. But Kyogo Furuhashi back to fitness, conveniently enough in time to face Aberdeen. I know he got a wee few minutes against Leverkusen, but Celtic always seem to have this luck that their key players come back in time to face us. Another brilliant ball in from David Turnbull, but questions are going to be asked. I'll come to you first, Calum, around an Aberdeen point of view from that goal. Why is McKenzie trying to win the ball? Just leave it. It would have gone out for our own throw. And then the ball into the box. What the hell is David Bates doing? Colin picked it up brilliantly in the previous show that he didn't cover himself in glory at St Mirren. He hasn't covered himself in glory again with that goal. You're letting the smallest player in the pitch chest the ball into the back of the net.
Yeah, it seemed very, very composed from Kyogo in the box there. And it is a concern, David Bates. When he came on, I thought we looked, well, when he was playing earlier in his career, we thought he looked very cool, calm, composed when he in his first appearance or two. And it seems to have gone rapidly downhill. It's a bit of concern. Obviously, mentioned Jack McKenzie. Again, it's probably the inexperience that's caused him to do that. But then, even after the throw-in's taken, he's left 2v1 and they get the ball in the box and it's not dealt with. Story of our season.
Yeah, and I suppose we should say konnichiwa to all the Japanese viewers that are maybe tuning in to hear what Colin's thoughts are on Kyogo's performance, because Celtic and Japanese players seem to go hand in hand with a bit of quality, and that doubling up that Celtic had on Jack McKenzie proved evident at the opener. David Turnbull with that bit of quality, and Kyogo doing what he's been doing most of the season and putting Celtic in front. David Turnbull, though, Colin, a player that's kind of been a bit questionable in terms of Celtic fans' opinions, certainly had a starring role yesterday.
Yeah, I think he was given that freedom yesterday because he wasn't playing alongside Tom Rogic. I think that's been the kind of the issue for Celtic this season, is they've been playing both of them as sort of the number 10, and there hasn't been that box-to-box midfielder sort of play alongside them. Whereas yesterday you saw Nir Beaton was the number 6 sitting, McGregor was the 8 going box to box, and Turnbull had the freedom of that sort of last final third to create the opportunities, and he did so very well for the goal. The question I had though, and I'd be interested in you guys' thoughts on this, is why was Johnny Hayes playing on the right-hand side?
I don't know. Well, Austin Samuels has only ever been playing on the left for us, so unless I noticed we swapped that in the second half, but it's got to be a tactical decision, but a tactical decision that was costly in the first half, I suppose.
Well, that's the thing. So you mentioned about the inexperience. Now, of the two, I'd say Ramsey's probably the better player.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need the protection of Hayes coming back to help him out. But if McKenzie's the one that Celtic's targeting, Johnny Hayes is one of the most experienced players on the field, can play left back and left mid. Surely if he's getting doubled up on, you switch him round and get Hayes to come back and help him out.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, Colin, although to be fair, I don't know about Calum, but I thought Johnny Hayes had a performance that Niall McGinn would have been proud of. You know, a former Celt coming up against his former team.
But especially in the first half, I think he did improve in the second half. But
yeah.
The first half, oh my goodness, he was poor. And he looked past it. He did improve.
I was pulling what very little hair I have out at some of his touches in that first half.
See, when you think of that though, you're playing a guy that's left-footed on the right-hand side in a position that he's barely ever played. You're not going to get a starring performance out of him. I think Glass has to answer to that, why he played a guy who's predominantly left-footed out on the right-hand side. Did he think he was just going to tie it up with Jota? Because that's exactly what he does. It didn't make any sense to me.
Well, another insightful comment from Colin. You know, you do provide some good balanced insight. It's not just Celtic, you know, some good talking points that I know many Aberdeen fans that are tuning in either on YouTube or listening in will sure to have an opinion on what your thoughts are. And Colin, another interesting and highly talking point from the game was the battle between Jota and Calvin Ramsey. Jota getting away with plenty fouls during the 90 minutes before eventually picking up a booking. But Calum, I'll come to you first. I thought Calvin Ramsey dealt with him in the first half very well, and I thought, you know, Colin did text me earlier saying a gust of wind would have blown Calvin Ramsey over yesterday, but I think it was just a bit of, you know, we touched on a bit of inexperience, but maybe a clever play from Calvin Ramsey to buy these fouls from Bobby Madden, because he was quite whistle happy yesterday, was the man in black.
He very much was. I think Calvin Ramsey, as you say, for his young age and his inexperience, he knows he has that sort of nous, I guess, the sort of maybe the dirty streak, that little bit of nastiness that, and he knows how to play these kind of games, I guess. I was impressed with how he dealt with Jota. I thought Jota was very good against Leverkusen, to be fair, and he kept him relatively quiet, I suppose, at times. I think you are right to say he dealt with it better than McKenzie, and I suppose they were probably targeting McKenzie more. But I was impressed by Calvin Ramsey, and you know, long may this continue. But I'm getting concerned on now how much longer we'll be able to keep a hold of him.
Yeah, I did have to laugh at the Rangers fans jumping on the bandwagon now that Nathan Patterson was taken out of hibernation yesterday, and the fact that Calvin Ramsey may or may not have had a good game in their eyes against Celtic, that they finally think that Nathan Patterson's better than him. But that's quite a cute opinion. But Colin, from a Celtic point of view, Jota showing glimpses of the quality that he has, going on to grab the winner, but even in the first half, cutting inside brilliantly to flash a shot that bounces back off the crossbar.
Yeah, and I've got to say it was a very interesting battle between both Jota and Ramsey yesterday. I've always said when I've come on here, I'm a big fan of Calvin Ramsey. Mm-hmm. And yes, I guess you can say that he's, when you look back on it in reflection, he's been cute to win some of those fouls, because there's very little contact for very quite a few of them. Now, Celtic had something like 27 fouls yesterday, despite having the best part of 60-odd% possession. Mm-hmm. If you looked at that as stats onwards, you're going, what's happened here to create that many fouls? It basically worked out. It was one foul per minute of Aberdeen's possession yesterday, which is ridiculous when you think about it. Bobby Madden was terrible for both teams, but we can touch on that later. When Jota got the better of Ramsey, you saw this sort of flashes of brilliance that he can do. He's going to score an absolute rasper of a goal one week. because that's 3 times he's hit the bar now from about 30 yards. One of these times it's going to creep in. But yeah, he's definitely an outstanding talent. I think if he keeps this up, there'll be a number of suitors for him, and Celtic have just got to take that option to buy him regardless of what happens, because it's only €6.5 million. They might get a lot more than that for him.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose it's Calum made a good point about the way Calvin Ramsey dealt with that talent. It's how long we can hold on to him for. But as good as Celtic were in the opening 40 minutes, I've got to be disappointed by the way we approached the first 40 minutes, because let's be honest, I think Colin will definitely disagree with this. It's probably the worst Celtic side that's come to Pittodrie in a very long time. And I really thought that we would, take the game to Celtic. I didn't think we would it kind of reminisced of previous management where we let Celtic impose themselves on the game. Instead of when Celtic are not in poor form, we should be the ones asserting ourselves. We're at home, start the game on the front foot. And Calum, we saw when we did, start attacking towards the end of the first half, we caused Celtic problems, balls into the box, Austin Samuels with his 100-mile-an-hour balls across the face of goal, and Christian Ramirez with a volley that really shouldn't have caused Celtic problems, but Joe Hart deciding he hadn't had enough to do in the first half that he flapped it over the bar for another corner kick.
Joe Hart still looks a bit ropey for me, in my opinion. He's not convinced me yet. But I think you're right when you say perhaps one of the worst outsides in years. I think especially in the style that they're trying to play, and this playing out from the back with the fullbacks tucking in, it doesn't look like they are the good enough players to be doing that. They're trying to play out from the back without players like Ayer, Denier, Van Dijk that they've had over the years. And when we pressed them, you could see that they were uncomfortable, and it took too long to get that going. It took too long to get to put on that pressure, and it's a bit of a concern. But we did eventually get going towards the back end of the second half, as you said. It's just so frustrating that it takes so long, and it's coming from the touchline or from the players themselves. I'm getting sick and tired of it, man.
and I suppose from a Celtic point of view, they did, or they have struggled this season to deal with teams that have pace and attack them on the ground instead of balls in the air. Colin, as you touched on there, the 27 fouls, a stat that I'm sure Hearts would have been proud of to commit during a game. But as a Celtic fan, there must be concern there at how easily teams are still getting at their backline, because through that first half, once we learned that the fullbacks looked uncomfortable, Starfelt continuing, in my opinion, to look very unsure in Scottish football, we did cause problems. And Joe Hart, I know you weren't happy with him for the goal, but when he's flapping at easy opportunities like that in the first half, that's not going to instill confidence in your backline either.
No, and I think that the most important thing that Celtic fans need to take away from this is that defence is probably the final part of the jigsaw for Celtic. Once they get that right, then it could be a real diamond of a team that they've got. I know you said it's probably one of the worst Celtic teams to come up there, but I still think that team that played the second half of last season was absolutely dreadful. Not in terms maybe of looking at the team on paper, but just in terms of effort and aptitude that Celtic had last season. It was pathetic, and Aberdeen really should have beat them if it wasn't for Griffiths getting that 92nd minute goal or something like that. That's just the way it was last year. But you're right, Starfelt's not comfortable at centre-back. The full-backs aren't comfortable playing the inverted full-back. I'd still say, but you're still looking at a second-string Celtic defence in that sense. When Julian's back, he'll be the one to replace Starfelt. Yeah. When Juranovic is fit, he'll be the one to replace Anthony Ralston. When Taylor's fit, or when Scales comes into fitness or whatever it is, he'll be the one playing left-back. It won't be young Montgomery. So you're still looking at a second-string Celtic defence, and that's where teams do have the opportunity to have a go at them. But you look at it yesterday, for everything that Aberdeen threw at Celtic, the only thing that ended up in the back of the net was that sort of looping header. So what does it say more? Does it say more that this Celtic team are grinding out with a poor defence, or is it that the Aberdeen team aren't creating enough to trouble that poor defence?
Well, Calum, let's look at that second point. Do you feel that we did create enough. I felt halftime almost came at the wrong time for us, but I was pleased that we, carried that momentum into the second half. As Colin touched on there about the Johnny Hayes being on the right. We changed that at halftime, so Johnny Hayes moved to the left in front of Jack McKenzie and Austin Samuels on the right, and we really came out and had a go at Celtic, and we got that equaliser. But do you feel over the course of 90 minutes we did enough in terms of pressuring, let's be honest, what is a ropey Celtic defence, especially from balls into the box and set pieces?
I don't think so. No, I think it's frustrating. I definitely would agree. There's the latter of Colin's point there. That was probably more accurate in that we didn't do enough. We didn't do enough to, definitely not to win the game, and probably not even enough to take a point from it. As you probably hear, the dog in the background is really unhappy about it. We didn't do enough, and it is frustrating. I think perhaps maybe if Hedges features, then we could perhaps be looking at a different story. But you can't just keep relying on one man to take us out of it. I thought perhaps when Dylan McGeoch came on, I thought he looked quite positive. It was a shame probably it was for Brown rather than Longstaff. But we've got to start, when we create these chances, to start taking them. But we need to be creating more. There's still sometimes some nice football at times, but it's getting frustrating.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of times, especially in the first half, where we got the ball into position to get the ball into the box. And, it was a pass to another player to get the ball into the box. We weren't, first time. And, I was obviously too busy looking at the winger for the ball going into the box, whether or not we had a lack of support in there. But every time I thought we got the ball into, anywhere between the penalty spot and Joe Hart's goal line, Celtic just looked uncomfortable. And I suppose, it's no surprise that the goal came from a set piece. But Colin, we'll start with you, because I think the dog's still barking for Calum. Celtic have got to be disappointed with the concession of that goal, because it looks like it comes off Lewis Ferguson's shoulder, if not near Beaton. But Montgomery on the line doesn't get there, and Joe Hart just admires what is a very scrappy equaliser.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Hart's got to take full command of his goal line. If he thinks there's any chance of that ball going into the back of the net, he's got to take out Montgomery and stop that ball going into the back of the net. Apologise afterwards, but you, as a goalkeeper, your main job is to keep the ball out the back of the net. Don't rely on the left back, who's like 5'4". He's probably a bit taller than that, but that's the way he looked when he jumped yesterday. Your main goal is to keep the ball out the back of the net. And it was the kind of spark that got Aberdeen back into the game, was the goal. And from that point onwards, they were sort of on top for that 10-15 minute spell. But as I said, that was the kind of biggest chance Aberdeen had. Everything else was sort of Samuels from outside the box, Hayes from outside the box. They just couldn't get through to create something noteworthy.
Yeah, and Calum, and I suppose we'll look at that from an Aberdeen point of view. We've talked about Alan Russell plenty of times, but for the second game running, it's another goal from a corner, I don't know, can we call it a well-worked set piece, or is it a big slice of fortune there?
Yeah, I think it is fair to say a big slice of luck, perhaps helped by Joe Hart's complete lack of confidence, as Colin's mentioning. Didn't come collect the ball, didn't come out and clatter Montgomery. But you saw that when he was, not catching shots that he should have been and things like that as well. But I suppose on the flip side, as I said, from an Aberdeen point of view, we can look at it as it's another set-piece goal. It'll go down as that for the stats, but I don't think we can take too much credit. I suppose you can give Calvin Ramsey the credit for the good ball into the box. Ferguson, for even though he didn't get the final touch, putting that pressure on, beat on. Yeah. So I guess in some way, one for the stats, perhaps more than in real life. Shall we say?
Yeah, definitely. And for those of you that are currently watching the video on YouTube, unfortunately, Colin has had to temporarily leave the episode. It's been great having him on to provide an insight into just some Celtic opinions on, and I'm glad we've managed to catch him on the, Ramsey Jota display, and also how Celtic started the game in terms of the doubling up, because that was, a real issue to us. Hopefully he will be back later on in the episode, but these are the things we can't always tie down guests permanently. But he touched on the other chances that we had. Calum, the Scott Brown header, Stephen Glass says either side with the keeper, that goes in. Different game at 2-1. Johnny Hayes obviously doing what he does against Celtic, shooting from distance, and Joe Hart gets down well to save. And I thought it was actually really good defending from Carter Vickers as well to deny Ramirez on the follow-up. But other than that, I can't really remember any other clear cut. Obviously, sitting in the Merkland is a bit hard to see how close some of these chances are in the second half. But yeah, it didn't really feel like anything clear cut. Even the Brown one for me in the Merkland, I couldn't see how close that was to going in, because even Ferguson's goal, it wasn't until the player started running off you hardly knew it had gone in.
I know it was that was a very, very bizarre one. Again, thanks to Joe Hart and Montgomery there. But you're right. I don't think we did create enough in terms of clear cut chances. You look at shots from range, as you mentioned, Samuel's firing over. Obviously, Hayes did force a good save from Joe Hart, but it's not enough. It's not enough clear cut chances, and it'd be frustrating enough had we created some and not taken them. But there was very, very few, and it is concerning. I guess they've got a good chance now going into the international break. A good couple of weeks on the training pitch to focus on that game against Dundee, which all of a sudden does become massive too.
Yeah, that game does become massive. And for those of you that might have heard Stephen Glass's post-match comments, which we're going to look into in a little bit as well, he did mention that we've organised a bounce game for the end of this week. For those that aren't away on international duty. So interesting to see who that's against. He hasn't said or never disclosed that, whether it's a Highland League team or just a local team, if it's going to be us against the under-16s, because we don't really have an under-18 squad. They're that young this season. But, maybe just a chance to work on something, and, hopefully the defence in particular, because once again, it's some cheap goals. But in Colin's absence, because he might be back later on in the episode, we'll just switch it back a little bit to look at the team news. And Gary Wood's coming in. I wasn't sure he would for this game. Coming in for Joe Lewis, there's been, yes, thank you very much, a lot of talk over Joe Lewis's recent performances. I don't really think he had much to do. It wasn't exactly at fault for either goal. It was difficult to really say if he was much better than what Joe Lewis has been this season.
He had very few saves to make, really. He wasn't tested so much. Again, I guess playing with the feet and perhaps maybe slightly better than Joe Lewis, but even then, he wasn't as good as I recalled previously, which is a bit of a concern. I did think it was a bit of an interesting decision, particularly coming in such a big game against Celtic, to then do that when you've already got a shaky defence and then it's someone who they're not as familiar with playing in goals. And when, for Joe Lewis's confidence, but I guess maybe a chance for him to regroup over the international break and see how that goes from then. If he impresses in training, gets that confidence back, then for the Dundee game, that would be very much welcome. Because although Guy Woods is okay, he's a decent shot stopper, there's a reason he's been at the clubs he's at and he's second choice here. When we're trying to, compete the way Glass has been saying, I don't think Gary Woods is necessarily going to be that man. But I guess who knows, who are we to judge? We've not been on great form, so let's try and find out. I'm really optimistic, clearly. Yeah,
and I did. I felt sorry for him when Sportscene decided to reel off the start that Gary Woods has never been part of a team to beat Celtic.
I know, not great.
No, not great. Obviously, Ryan Hedges missed out yesterday due to illness. Once again, showing how big a part he is in this Aberdeen squad and how much we really miss him. Austin Samuels came in and did well again, got good feet, good control, blasting the ball across the face of the box like he's been doing in previous week, but maybe with a bit better control, firing a few attempts on target. But as we touched on earlier in this episode, maybe defensively not as good or as helpful as Ryan Hedges. Is that fair to say? Is that a bit harsh maybe?
No, I would say that is fair. I think, the fact I was under the impression he was brought in as a striker and now he's playing on the wing, so he's not used to even being a winger and tracking back, probably not that much, really. I think it will come something that comes with time, I suppose, and perhaps lack of experience in games of that size as well. Perhaps not only what's required, but hopefully we'll see that improve. I think we did miss out Ryan Hedges not being there. I think he does give a bit of bite as well. He isn't scared to get involved. It's a shame he did miss out illness. Let's hope it's not COVID, because then that could be longer than perhaps a stomach bug or whatever. But the sooner he's back, the better, I think. I still would like to see, if fit against Dundee, the front three of Ramirez, Samuels and Hedges, see how that works. Quite dynamic and mobile, and see if we can test that Dundee defence.
Yeah, well, having watched the highlights of how St Johnstone and Michael Halloran in particular managed to rip apart that Dundee defence yesterday, it would be really exciting seeing both Hedges and Samuels involved in a couple of weeks' time. The other change, there was a change that I kind of predicted in the preview show with Colin in terms of midfield, that Matty Longstaff would come in for Teddy Jenks, and that was based on the assumption that Funso Ojo would not be fit. I'm not actually sure what the problem is with Funso, not in the matchday squad for the second game in a row. But for all the hype around a signing from of a midfielder from a Premiership team such as Newcastle, I have to say he's really not impressed me at all so far in his time at Aberdeen. I just don't know what he brings to the side. Runs about like a headless chicken at times. And yeah, I just really think he's struggled to adapt, whether it's to the pace of the game up in Scotland or struggling to adapt to the role he's been given in this team. I'm just think he's a bit lost just now. I don't know what your opinions are on Matty Longstaff.
I totally agree. I mean, at times I've watched him for Newcastle and he's been very, very impressive. Obviously, he's scored twice against Manchester United. But it's just, I think in this Aberdeen team, he doesn't seem to know. I don't know what his role is. Does anyone have any sort of clue what sort of midfield players Yeah, please do let us know. Here's one for the audience. But no, yeah, it is a concern. You used the words headless chicken there. I think that is fair. I don't know, what am I trying to say? Assessment, that's the word. Bloody hell. It's difficult.
Private education for you there.
I know.
Paying off.
I'm glad that fees were worth them. But no, I think you're right. He doesn't look like he belongs. He doesn't look like he has any sort of particular role. And it's a bit of a concern. I would expect perhaps better from a player, as you say, from someone from the Premier League. It's a bit like it's Teddy Jenks when he first came into the side. Like what's he really all about? I guess maybe it'll take time to adapt. He's not played regular football for a very, very long time, or much of it at all. So I guess a bit of time to get up to the speed of things, and hopefully he does eventually get there. But we've seen it before, people coming up from England and not being able to deal with speed, despite this being, a pub league.
Yeah, exactly. Not so tin pot now. Where are we in the game? So yes, we're 1-1. We've been creating chances, and I don't know. I think it's been interesting to hear Colin's point, because obviously he never got a ticket for the game yesterday. But at the game, I certainly felt that we were on top up to the point where we unfortunately had to make. Obviously, at the time being there, we didn't know why Scott Brown had to come off, since discovered that it's due to cramp. Stephen Glass saying because the pitch was so damp, it was heavier than players were used to, and that was affecting Scott Brown's legs, so he was cramping up, which is a bit disappointing to hear. And I really think at the time in the game, him coming off really stemmed our momentum, but obviously you thought McGeoch had quite a positive impact.
I think McGeoch as an individual came on and performed rather well. I think it's just unfortunate, as in terms of the team game, that it was for Scott Brown. As we said, perhaps better for Matty Longstaff if that was an option, but obviously clearly it wasn't. I hope that the dampness was maybe having an effect on Matty Longstaff's legs as well. I hope so. But I guess when we signed Scott Brown, that kind of thing's going to happen from time to time with his age, with the type of shifts he's been putting in every week for the last 15 years or whatever. Unfortunately, I think we did sort of lose some sort of a foothold in the game there. Perhaps the organisation and the experience that he brings as well, that we lacked. Once he went off and paid the price ultimately.
Yeah, paid the price ultimately. I thought that's a good tongue twister. But we say subs change games, and yes, Colin said the man we really don't like naming from a Celtic point of view. We had the sense of inevitability when Stevie May came on against us, scored the winner, when Curtis Main came on, involved in the winner. you just knew when Tom Rogic came on for near beat on, he was going to have his part to play.
I hate him so much. Just so much. Can somebody please buy him? I wish when there was a rumour he was going to go to play in Qatar.
Yeah.
I really wish that happened. This man has been the bane of my life for far too long, and the bane of many an Aberdeen fan, I'm sure. One day he won't haunt us, and I long for that day. But once again, as you say, he did come back and play his part, as Tom Rogic does against Aberdeen every single time, it would seem.
Yeah, it really did. And I think he added a bit of composure to the midfield for them, because, as you know, Colin said, we didn't really impose ourselves in midfield in the opening 40 minutes, but up until Tom Rogic came on, I know Near Beaton picked up a booking in the second half. Until Tom Rogic came on, I thought Celtic didn't have any composure in midfield, and that's where Aberdeen had the stronghold. But you know, the subs change games, and before we get on to the winner and look into that from an Aberdeen point of view, I just want to get on to your thoughts on the final change of the day that we made. You know, we made a tactical change. Austin Samuels was, tiring towards the end. He brought on Connor McLennan. I know a few folk maybe think we should have taken off Johnny Hayes instead, and maybe get your opinion on that. But with 2 minutes to go, you're trailing 2-1, you're needing a goal. You take off Matty Longstaff, who, let's be honest, the game passed by for large periods, and you bring on Dean Campbell. A like-for-like switch. I just didn't get it at all.
I like Dean Campbell, first of all. I think he does have a bit of quality about him that perhaps some players don't. But it's not the type of game he would come on and change. If you're going to bring on a midfielder, then in that sort of time, you'd think Celtic are tiring, they've played midweek. A player with legs perhaps might have been better. I don't think Dean Campbell offers that sort of burst from midfield like perhaps Ferguson does. I think it was right that Ryan Longstaff came off, as we said. It was a shame that maybe McGill couldn't have replaced him earlier. But yeah, it's an interesting one, especially when you've got maybe more positive players on the bench. Looking at Jet, okay, his effort perhaps at times has maybe been questioned, but it's a player that we've seen again. He's played against in games against us when he played for Livingston. He can produce a moment of magic, and I think when you've gone that and throughout the game like that and not created many clear-cut chances, maybe give him sort of 5 minutes, see if he can produce something out of nowhere when we're running out of options. But that was not the case. It was an interesting substitution from Stephen Glass. Perhaps he knows something we didn't. He saw something we didn't maybe, but I definitely didn't see any reason for that.
Yeah, no, and let's be honest, or let's be clear, it's absolutely nothing against Dean Campbell as an individual. It's just a change that made absolutely no sense. Looking at the bench, who the unused subs were was Jet, Jack Gurr and Declan Gallagher. So, we weren't blessed with many options on the bench to bring on, but would Jet have made a difference for that last couple of minutes, last 5 minutes? Just throw him up as a battering ram. Let's be honest, he hasn't impressed much, but Celtic haven't coped with physical presences in their defence. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. Just that substitution to me made absolutely no sense. And I feel a bit sorry for Dean Campbell. He's been starved of minutes so far this season. He gets on, but I just really didn't understand it at all.
Nope, I wholeheartedly agree. Can't even say wholeheartedly today. I'm having a stinker today.
Yeah, we're having a good time. At least that segment there was totally seamless and didn't have to be edited at all, Calum?
No. Those listening might not have had a clue, but those watching will definitely have had a clue.
Yeah, and we're delighted to be rejoined again by Colin, who did have to temporarily slip away. Perfectly timed on his return as we come up to discuss the winning goal for Celtic. So thanks very much for joining back again, Colin. You're still on mute.
I really couldn't have missed that section as I'm leaving Calum with even more editing work to do. So apologies for that, Calum. But no, good to be back. Apologies for the interruption.
No, none at all. We managed to just dissect the Aberdeen point of view in your absence, and we were speaking there, just as you rejoined, about the substitutions and the influence that they had on the game. And I suppose we'll just get your point of view on the Celtic sub. We've covered it in as brief amount of time as we can because we don't like speaking about Tom Rogic, but we were speaking about the lack of composure that Celtic seem to have in the midfield, and just that sort of composure really and influence that he brought to the Celtic midfield when he came on, and that obviously showed in him picking the pass that led to Montgomery squaring for Jota to score the winning goal for Celtic.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it from about sort of maybe the 70th minute onwards, maybe a slight bit later, I felt as though the Aberdeen team really started to tire and they went onto the back foot and they were inviting the Celtic pressure onto them. It was almost as if they were holding out for the point. And Celtic, to be fair to them, they didn't give up. They kept going. It was going from side to side. It was going out wide. The crosses were coming over. The opportunities just weren't being created. And then, as you said, Tom Rogic comes on, and it's like saying Voldemort on a Harry Potter podcast when I mentioned Tom Rogic in here. But he just has that ability to slow the game down to his pace. He's very difficult to get the ball off of. There was a spell in the second half when he came on where 4 Aberdeen players tried to take the ball off him. 3 of them had a kick at him, and he still managed to keep the ball. And Bobby Madden still didn't manage to see a foul. So that was impressive. But no, he does well in these situations to find the gaps where others can't. There were attempts to play that ball through numerous times before, but Tom Rogic managed to find the gap to Montgomery, and Montgomery's in his more natural position, being further forward than being at the back, squares it, and Jota gets in front of his man, which is something that the Celtic wingers seem to do very well, whether it be Abada or Jota. And I think we mentioned this in the preview. If they can get across the man they're marking, they'll go on to the end of the ball. And that's exactly what Jota did yesterday. And the scenes afterwards weren't great. We'll not touch on it for too long. I did see that the young lad was charged. It's a bit silly. I think a strong word and basically try and knock that out of him would have been better than landing him with a charge. But we've got to eradicate things like this out of football.
Yeah, Police Scotland doing their best to take the fun out of football, but I suppose you're right, a strong word. It's not obviously these sort of scenes, it's not stuff we like to see, but I think given his age and that, a strong word in his ear would have been more than enough. I know the SLO did that at the game at the time, but Calum, just to pick up on a point that Colin made there, I certainly felt it at the game as the game progressed, because it seems to be the way against Celtic. They have a late goal against us. Did you feel the same? Did you have that sense of inevitability that if there was going to be another goal, it would have been for Celtic? Or did you think we were going to manage to hold on?
I think I was hopeful. But when you see us, as we've seen so many times, when it turns to sort of that 70th, 80th minute mark, and we try and sit in and hold on to what we've got, and the amount of times we've seen it collapse, and especially with this defence, I felt there was that sense of inevitability that we would not be able to hold on. And we were right, unfortunately. It's making me miserable thinking about it. Just about got over it, and here we are again.
Yeah, and I suppose the one thing when I watched the highlights back this afternoon, just to kind of refresh my memory, fair play to the SPFL highlights on YouTube, for those of us, or those of you that are currently watching this on YouTube, you'd think that Aberdeen did nothing after equalising, because the very next highlight is the winner. And yes, you do see me celebrating wildly at the equaliser in those highlights. But the one pickup I have from an Aberdeen point of view, Calum, is that Johnny Hayes is left with both Kyogo and Montgomery to mark, and he either doesn't know who to go with or is looking for support, but in the end doesn't go with either when Rogic plays that through ball. Is that something that Stephen Glass will be frustrated at, or something that we can maybe work on? Because when you look at it from that point of view, yes, it's a wonderful ball, but once again, I just feel maybe we could have done better with, and it's another cheap goal from an Aberdeen point of view.
I would probably agree. I think there's the lapse in concentration, perhaps, when Hayes is stuck in two minds between who to go with essentially. And then Rogic is the player that he only needs that split second, that little bit of time. He's got that quality to slip a ball in like that, and we were punished by it. And I think fair play, Ange Postecoglou, I suppose, taking Rogic on, sees that perhaps the midfield is tiring, it's getting leggy on a heavy pitch, and that Rogic can find those gaps, and took him on for Beaton as well. So that's a very positive change. As much as I don't like giving Celtic credit, I guess that's the change that won them the game, and it's very, very frustrating, but that's the way it is.
It's funny you say that, because we're talking about the Celtic left-hand side again. So that's the Aberdeen right once again, and Johnny Hayes is there. That's something Glass has got to look at. It doesn't work having Johnny Hayes on the right-hand side of the field. I can tell you that, having seen him try it once at Celtic. It just doesn't work. The man is left-footed, and he's very good down the left-hand side.
So left-footed as well. It's unbelievable. He can't even dribble on his right foot. No, that frustrates me a lot.
No, he uses it to stand on. That's all he does. He's very, very left-footed. And why try and play someone out of their position? That was Celtic's, the fans' biggest kind of uproar to that substitution yesterday, was that Albion Ayeti came on to play through the middle. That man had 2 touches when he came on the park, and he was on for about 17 minutes. And you take what is Celtic's probably most influential player in Kyogo and play him out on the left-hand side. Now, it actually worked in the end because of the space that he created for Montgomery to cut inside him. But we saw when he went to Ibrox, he was completely useless out on the left-hand side. It's only when you see him through the middle that he's able to create these chances. So, yeah, positive substitution from Postecoglou. We've obviously had more attacking options to bring on yesterday. But for a lot of fans, it's like, well, you got away with that one. You know what I mean? Like bringing Ayeti on, he's not the option.
And I was kind of harping back to your comments about what if Celtic started with Albion Ayeti when he came on yesterday, Colin, thinking, oh, that's fine, because he's not exactly going to be high on confidence given his last outing against Dundee United, and obviously not scoring in midweek either. But just want to get both of your opinions on the post-match comments from both managers, because there are going to be Celtic fans that tune into this episode to obviously hear your thoughts, Colin, and as well as what the Aberdeen perspective is on what is now another result that leaves Aberdeen nine without victory. And we'll start from Celtic point of view. Ange Postecoglou coming out and saying pleased that Celtic didn't settle for a point. There was a lot of pressure going into this game for both managers. Celtic's well-documented poor away form, Colin. Just how big a 3 points is that then for Celtic?
I mean, a song that's usually reserved for winning away from home in Europe was drawn out by the fan base yesterday. This is the day that we win away.
Is that what it was for? I just thought it was just in general because you just don't win away from home.
Oh, that is actually probably why it did get rolled out yesterday, because it's been the best part of nearly 8 months since Celtic won away from home in the league. So, yeah, it was. I've got to say credit to the fans yesterday. I thought they didn't stop from the first minute to the last minute, and I think they gave the players that extra 10% on the field. As I mentioned to you in the preview show, if you can quiet Pittodrie down, I think it takes a lot out of the players. I've seen, going up to Aberdeen before, when you get the fans behind you, you're a very difficult team. But when the stadium's quiet, it's almost as if the fans aren't there. And I think that was kind of what flattened Aberdeen for the first 40 minutes yesterday. And then when you got into it and the fans got behind them, as you said, half-time came at the wrong time. So Postecoglou's right in what he says, that it's good to see that they didn't give up. He's been harping on and on about us being a 90-minute team, and we're seeing that with the sort of later goals that's coming into the game. I think we're still a good bit away from being the finished article, and we're probably 1 or 2 injuries away from being in another disastrous position, which was sort of echoed by his comments that said, if you get injured on international duty, don't bother coming back. Which was quite funny. I think that's a hint to any player that thinks they might have a wee niggle, just to say to their national coach that don't play me in these games and get me on the first flight back to Glasgow, because we've got a busy October fixture schedule coming up. Again, we're back to playing 2 games a week, and we've got a very small squad, which is quite interesting to say at Celtic. Usually you say Celtic's got a depth of talent, but it's just not there this year. So We need all our best players back and fighting fit and hopefully get involved in the title race.
Yeah, and Colin, interesting point there Colin made about the fans. Sitting in the Merkland, it's not often I don't really hear the away support. Having sat in Section S in the catchy songbook that the Celtic fans bring out, it was very quiet sitting in the Merkland, didn't really hear them. But I actually thought the Red Shed did okay yesterday, were quite vocal. I really enjoyed the new tune that they got branded out, the Palace song that they always sing, pre-match or when they score. That started getting adapted to Dandies instead of Palace. That was a good one. I'm sure that'll be sung in full flow at Dundee away, especially at a 6 o'clock kickoff.
That'll be dangerous, first of all, before we go any further. Yeah, well, it was interesting. I was kind of caught between two, being by the fence. I didn't think Celtic fans were perhaps as vocal at times as they have been previously. I think that's probably due to the fact Sunday 12 o'clock kickoff. In terms of the Red Shed, obviously we're quite far away from them as well. So I didn't hear it as well as everyone else perhaps did. But once again, fair play to them getting behind the team. Meanwhile, by the fence, anytime we tried to start a song, wasn't fun. Did not go down well. Very, very sad. Almost as sad as the statistics that we've not won in 9 and that Celtic have just won their first away game in the best part of 8 months. Yeah, definitely. And it's really sad stat that we played St Johnstone, who hadn't won a game in 90 minutes this season, picked up their first win. Played St Mirren, hadn't won all season in the league, picked up their first win. Played Celtic, haven't won away in 8 months, picked up their first away win. Next up in the league, Dundee, haven't won all season in the league. Well, I think we know what's going to happen there, folks. So, worrying times for Aberdeen, Calum, and Stephen Glass is, under pressure. I think it's fair to say, from elements of the sport. I know you're in the camp that is willing to give him some time, but he didn't seem best pleased with some of the questioning that he got in his post-match press conference on BBC Scotland. I was listening to it on the way home from the game. He was asked whether or not he thought the team was too open. Now, I'm going to get Colin's point of view on this as well as a neutral to our current plight. But Calum, I'll start with you. Stephen Glass, kind of dismissed the point that we were quite open and that we were conceding sloppy goals. But we've kept, one clean sheet in 21 games under Stephen Glass. Are we too open? And let's be honest, we do need to sort ourselves out defensively. We do concede sloppy goals. I don't think there's no hiding from that. It's a bit of a catch-22 in that when our defence is so poor, we then have to outscore the opposition. So we do end up being ultimately more open and leaving the defence more exposed. It's a bit of a problem that we need to sort out. I think the only way to sort it out is by improving that defence. I can understand his frustration in these kind of questions that he's been asked when previous manager, I guess, has had such an easy ride from media. But I suppose that's probably not even coming into his mind. But that's just my perspective on things. But yeah, no, I do agree with him that there is sloppy goals and it does need to be worked on. And hopefully over the international break, obviously things won't be fixed. It won't be a miracle, but we do need time and 2 weeks on the training pitch. Hopefully we'll see things improve. And hopefully we won't see a fit Lee Griffiths or a non-suspended Lee Griffiths. Not really sure what's going on with him. So inevitably scored against us again. Yeah, and I suppose as well, he kind of had a bit to say on the fullbacks. It was maybe, we've touched on it in this podcast itself. I don't know if it's okay maybe for fans to have their opinions, but I don't really know how I feel about the manager singling out the 2 youngest players in the squad for their inexperience being factors in the goals, especially the first one in Jack McKenzie. Maybe do that in-house instead of so publicly. But Glass is sitting with 6 wins in his first 21 games as Aberdeen manager. It's a 28.6 win percentage. Only Mark McGee and Alex Miller, those of you that are old enough to remember him, because I don't think,
if I don't remember, and Calum definitely won't, had worse percentages after 21 games. Alex Miller with 25.6% and Mark McGee 27.4%. Thank you very much to Fraser Walls for that very helpful stat that he provided there. But Colin, it is worrying from an Aberdeen point of view that we're going through this bad run of form. But what do you make of, Glass getting very defensive over us being quite open? Because, you host State of Scottish Football on a Friday night on a State of Mind. So, you do give opinion to all of Scottish football, not just Celtic focused. Do you think Aberdeen have been quite open this season?
They have, but that's part of Stephen Glass's game plan. And he's openly admitted that that's the way it is. And that the idea being that you're meant to be a better side than the team that you're coming up against. And in Aberdeen's point, that should be the case for at least half the league. Then you get into the games against Hearts, Hibs, Celtic, Rangers, and whoever's the sort of other top six side at that point, whoever's in form. At the minute, Motherwell. And at that point, you've got to look at it as what Calum said, you've got to either outscore the other team, and that can be very difficult, especially if you go to a Ibrox or a Celtic Park or a Tynecastle, because they'll score 1 or 2, which means you need to score 3. And that is very difficult for Aberdeen. They've only scored 7 goals this season so far. So what do? Do you go to a plan B? Well, your plan B would be to sort of stop the other team from scoring and to hit them on the break. But at the minute, your centre-back pairing cannot be trusted. With McCrory and Bates playing alongside each other. McCrory, I think, is a fantastic player. Bates showed in glimpses yesterday what he can do, but he also showed in glimpses why he basically didn't have a career after he left Rangers. He went to Hamburg and was dropped and then was released. So that says a lot about what the kind of talent of David Bates is. And as I said earlier on, if you're going to have the young fullbacks, yes, they're going to be inexperienced. Yes, they're going to get experience from playing in these games, but protect them. Have someone in there so that they can double up and it stops the crosses from coming over. You look at Rangers, probably about 70% of their goals come from crosses. The 2 goals yesterday came from crosses. So if you know that's an area that teams are going to exploit, don't just leave it wide open.
No.
If you're able to identify that's a weakness right away, then do something about it. And then the other kind of aspect of Aberdeen's game at the minute is they're not creating enough going forward. Now, I kind of caught the end of the conversation about Jet, right? He's a big barge pole, he'll throw himself about, but he's not going to get you 10 goals this season. Ramirez will get 10 to 15 goals, but he needs the service to him. Ryan Hedges was desperately missing out of that game yesterday. I think Ryan Hedges is a fantastic talent, but it can't just be left to Hedges and to Ramirez to do everything. Other players need to step up. I've been very critical of him in this podcast, and I know it's kind of came as a shock to you guys before, but Lewis Ferguson, to me, doesn't do enough. I think yesterday, he got his goal. It was a bit of a fluke that went over it. What else did he contribute in that game? As a player who wants to make the next move away from Aberdeen, surely he's got to be showing other teams in the league or other teams down south what he can contribute to that team. It's as if now he's got a Scotland cap. He's like, I'm definitely going to get a move away from Aberdeen. I don't think he's anywhere near good enough.
Yeah, and it's an opinion that many people have had, and I heard the young guys behind me made that point, Colin. Other than scoring yesterday, what did Lewis Ferguson do in the game? But they also made the same point about Kyogo. They thought other than scoring, he'd been pretty anonymous yesterday as well. And it's interesting. Obviously, everyone has their own opinions, and it's kind of nice to hear what an opposition fan sees or thinks, Calum, on how we are currently doing. And you're being the one that's being more positive on Aberdeen, which is quite strange given how we were last season. But we are still in a transition period. People don't like saying it. Celtic won the inaugural transition derby. Well done, Colin. But how long? Yeah, you can hold that fake trophy aloft. But how long does Stephen Glass get? Because I was thinking of this before we were recording today, how I wanted to approach this viewpoint. Ultimately, we're only we're still in the league, but we're not going to be competing for the league anymore. We're going to be struggling to compete for the European places at this rate. So realistically, the only thing we've got to compete for is the Scottish Cup. Now we're not going to be in that until the end of January. Do we, and I know you're a big fan of this, do we still persist with Stephen Glass up until the Scottish Cup and give him time to continue to implement what is, being done so far? Or will results dictate otherwise? Because it's been well documented how tricky our next 4 fixtures are after the international break. I do think he will get all 4 fixtures to see what he can do, but I don't know. Football's a results-based business, and other teams maybe have some more favourable fixtures in comparison. I just don't know what to really think of what lies ahead for Aberdeen just now.
I think, well, all of a sudden the game against Dundee is huge and has to be a win under no circumstances, basically. But I would say, as you mentioned, obviously Scottish Cup kicks in sort of in January. I would say, providing it's not still a total disaster between now and then, he has to be given that window as well to carry on recruiting his players.
As much money as possible.
Probably as much money as possible for it to be a success. But he needs to be given that to sort of carry on forming his squad. We need to see how the Scottish Cup goes. I think basically if we finish in the top 6 this season, he will then, providing he's still here at the end of the season, then he will then keep his job and carry on going into the next season. I think he will do that as long as we basically don't end up in this relegation scrap, which I can't see us doing. I think there is probably enough quality to get us probably into that top 6. Maybe not much more than that, but we should do that, and providing he recruits well in January, then that should hopefully be the case. I'm being very positive, Glenn.
Do you know, it's interesting when you look at that, because I think the problem that Celtic had over the last couple of weeks is very similar to the problem that Aberdeen had, in that players are just not turning up. The players need to take a lot more responsibility for the performances as well. I mean, the first thing that comes out is the pressures on Stephen Glass, the pressures on Ange Postecoglou. Where is the pressure on guys like Albion Ayeti? Where is the pressure on Lewis Ferguson? Where is the pressure on David Turnbull to step up and actually do something for the team? I mean, Stephen Glass has been backed very well in the time that he's been at Aberdeen. The wages and the transfer fees that are going out there, that's stuff that Derek McInnes would have dreamt of when he was in charge. I'm not going to say that Derek McInnes would have brought those sort of players in, but you're looking at guys like Longstaff who are on a very good contract at Newcastle, and I'm not saying Aberdeen's paying all his wages, but they'll have to pay a percentage. And Ramirez coming in as well. So it's about time that these guys actually stood up and took a bit of responsibility. Now, I had this same issue with Scott Brown last year. He's a captain and he's a leader, but where was that leadership in the park yesterday? Where was if Mackenzie and Ramsey were being the ones that were being doubled up on? Where was his intelligence to say, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to protect them for 5 minutes. I'm going to put a tackle in on Jota, and it means he's not going to try and take him on again. Or I'm going to put a tackle in on Abada. The games are passing by Scott Brown, and I said this to you before when you signed him. He's not someone that's going to give you 90 minutes every single week. He's someone who, if you get 50, 60 minutes out of him, or you need to control a game with 30 minutes to go, he's the guy you turn to. He's not someone who's going to be that leader that he was under the Celtic period of dominance. You need guys like Ferguson, like McClellan, to stand up and to say that this is my jersey, you might be the captain, but you can be the captain in the training ground, you can be the captain on the bench. You've got to try and get that jersey off of me.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I suppose the final point, before we wrap things up, is Billy Dodds made an interesting point as well on the programme on Sports Sound yesterday, saying that he saw glimpses, and I think, Colin, we can both see glimpses of what Glass is trying to do. It is there. We are playing an attacking brand of football. We're certainly a more expansive style of football, which is certainly catching us out at the back. And, Colin makes a point, players have got to stand up. Someone in that defence has got to stand up and take ownership to say, we need clean sheets. It's all well and good working things on the training ground, but when they cross that white line, it's up to, Stephen Glass can only do so much, Monday to Friday. When those players cross the white the whitewash at the weekend, it's their responsibility to put in a performance, to take pride in playing for that shirt that all of us would love to have the opportunity to do. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, some players are falling short in that standard. But Billy Dodds is saying that he can see the work that Stephen Glass is doing. We are playing an attractive brand of football, an expansive brand of football, but it's not clicking. And unfortunately, as a point kind of Colin made there, Celtic or whoever we're playing will score 1, 2. We've ultimately got to then score 3, 4. And, you made that point earlier in the season as well. But the problem with the style of play that we're having just now is the fans might enjoy it, but unfortunately the results aren't coming. Mm-hmm. And whilst the results aren't coming, fans will lose patience. And the big question, I suppose, is how much patience does our fan base have to put up with this project? In inverted commas, is that harsh to say? Let's be honest, Dave Cormack was very much in the limelight in the early part of the season, speaking up on Stephen Glass. Dave, you've been very quiet recently. It's been fair to say. But Calum, how patient do you think, a lot of guests come on and say we're the fan base that likes to moan the most. Will we have enough patience for Stephen Glass?
I don't know if we will. For the time being, right now, I personally feel he deserves the time. We'll see how he does with the backing and see where we end up. But obviously, everyone has different opinions, and rightly so. We will see how much patience is afforded to Stephen Glass from the fans. We know things got very, very toxic, I suppose you could say, towards the end of the McInnes reign, and that was after having a very successful period under him. Obviously, things got a bit stale, perhaps a bit boring. I think it would be unfair to say this is boring right now, but it isn't getting results.
It's not. And I suppose the thing is as well, you mentioned toxic, and I suppose social media doesn't help. Colin, you'll have seen it at Celtic. As soon as results don't go their way, the fans bombard the message boards. You'll see it on Axom during your daily bulletins, the negativity that flows off the back of a bad result. And currently we're seeing Twitter and the comment section on the Aberdeen Facebook page is normally a laugh after a defeat with the negativity that comes out on there as well. But look, football's all about opinions. Whether you're for Glass giving him amount of time or you want to see a change. But if you want to see a change, who do you want to see take over? It's all well and good saying get rid, but who comes in and takes over? Let us know. Tweet us at RTG_podcast. Leave a comment below on the YouTube video. Leave a like if you've been enjoying the content. And as always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. We really do appreciate all the support that is being shown to us over the recent weeks in the growth of the channel. As we touched on, we're coming up to 100 episodes very quickly, it seems, Calum, and really excited to have got a special guest secured for that, and to get that one in the bag. It's going to be really hard to keep that one a secret for who that is for how long.
I'm looking at you though, Glen. I'll keep my lips sealed. I'm looking at you. But we very much do appreciate sport. I'm very excited for that. Let's just say no more. Let's just keep it under wraps, and then it'll be fine. Keep people guessing. Let us know who you think it's going to be actually as well.
Yeah, can I put a guess in? I'm allowed to put a guess in.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've got Aberdeen legends. Aberdeen legends. Jamie Smith.
Oh, good one. Ha ha ha.
Done already. Listen back if you haven't already. That's a good one there. Thank you for that.
That was a bit of a free plug for you guys. There you go.
Yeah. Well, that's not the correct guess, but do let us know who you think it may or may not be. Colin, as always, thank you very much for your contribution on red tinted glasses. For those of you that have enjoyed Colin's input, if you're a Celtic fan, make sure you listen in to him on a Celtic State of Mind. Colin, what days do you do a Celtic State of Mind on?
So I'm on a Wednesday. So it's Wednesday lunchtimes, 12:30 to 1:30.
So for Celtic fans that are still listening to this point, thank you very much. That's where you can catch Colin. You can also catch him on a Monday night on A State of Mind, hosting the State of Scottish Football show. You can find me on that on a Monday night. So if you are a fan of Scottish football in general and want to hear, myself, Colin, and the other range of guests that we've got on A State of Mind, head over to the State of Mind YouTube channel, hit that like button, and also hit the subscribe button there to get your roundup of daily Scottish football news between 6 and 7 o'clock at night. We've started up just over the last few weeks, and Colin, we're really seeing a good growth in that segment already.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great variety of guests that support all teams, even including Ayr United, who I didn't think were much of a team until Jim Duffy took back over. But sorry for that one, Jack. But no, it's great to have you on board, and we continue to hopefully be eventually the number one place to find out all the ins and outs of Scottish football. So as Glen says, please do subscribe and come and check us out.
Yeah, so subscribe to State of Mind, subscribe to Red Tinted Glasses. And if you are subscribed, hopefully when you listen back, we'll have something positive to chat about next time on the next episode. So thank you very much for tuning in.
That's not going to happen. It's not going to be positive.